Hello, everybody. I'm Rob Wallace here in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm an evolutionary epidemiologist with the People's CDC here with an update on the COVID-19 pandemic. This week, we'll cover the state of global COVID and the state of U.S. COVID. We'll also introduce the People's CDC's external review of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It took the People's CDC a year to parse through the literature and poll 500 people, including public health practitioners and community leaders, to complete the review. We begin with global COVID. In the top graph, our world in data using WHO data reports us at 438,000 confirmed global cases this past week, a low we haven't seen since May 2020. The bottom graph shows us at 3,300 confirmed deaths, which we haven't seen since March 2020. This is at a time when countries around the world are also reducing surveillance. We do see, however, from the Economist data set excess deaths per 100,000 in decline toward pre-pandemic levels. There has been a bump up in excess deaths since late March, particularly in Mexico, Ireland, Russia, and Bangladesh. Using WHO data, our world in data shows weekly hotspots as of April 2nd. Our world in data warns, however, that the confirmed COVID cases per million people for the week is lower than the true number of infections due to limited testing. We see rebounds in the US, Canada, and Brazil, the near whole of Europe, especially Austria and Greece, as well as in Japan and South Korea. As we can see from these percent changes in caseloads the past couple of weeks, rebounds there in the warm colors are still scattered across the globe. In the Western Hemisphere, the US, Guatemala, Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, and Uruguay show significant increases. Spain, France, Romania, Bulgaria, Denmark, and Norway are showing increases. Across Eurasia, Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Thailand, and Indonesia are showing increases, but also especially in Afghanistan, India, and Cambodia. In Africa, Mauritania, Senegal, Chad, and Ethiopia are reporting increases as well. And at a time when the vaccine strategy many governments say they're pursuing instead of non-pharmaceutical interventions is faltering, much of the world is at best vaccinated for variants no longer circulating. We see uneven campaigns in booster vaccination across the world. On the one hand, Chile, Peru, Uruguay, Cuba, Canada, Belgium, Finland, Germany, Italy, Australia, and Japan show top-tier booster campaigns with 70 or more people boosted per 100 population. In contrast, we see near nothing in Russia, India, Pakistan, Indonesia, and those even reporting in from Africa, as well as mediocre campaigns in the US, Mexico, Brazil, China, and Eastern Europe. This map hasn't changed much, though reported here to be updated April 11th. Indicating these campaigns have largely ground to a halt. Indeed, the CDC reports the US crawling up another 0.1% to 16.7% of its eligible population 5 years and older with an updated booster dose. Now, in the interest of trying to get you some sense of the nature of the pandemic, the People's CDC has been cobbling together these kinds of data across different variables from the start of our broadcast. But as the People's CDC's own Howard Waitskin, a medical doctor and sociologist, remarks, there are plenty of reasons why these data are problematic. So we're starting a series of observations over the course of the next few episodes, beginning today with the issue of what comprises a COVID case. Against both WHO and CDC efforts to standardize what comprises a COVID case, and here's the WHO's version, Waitskin observes that, quote, data about new cases, deaths, hospitalization, and similar measures that count individuals depend on the reporting of new cases by public health agencies at different population levels, national, state, provincial, county, regional, and local. There's wide variation in the completeness of case finding, criteria for diagnosis, and reporting practices. Some governments and agencies at all levels, Waitskin continues, have continued efforts to gather and report comprehensive information. Others have provided some data, but incompletely and inconsistently, and others either never attempted comprehensive case finding and reporting or stopped the effort entirely. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, underreporting of these data have been a problem throughout the world, and the problem has worsened over time. To address underreporting, some other measures may improve accuracy, such as excess mortality rates that exceed those of prior time periods, and wastewater assessments. Despite helpful findings, the accuracy and availability of these measures vary widely in different geographical areas, end quote. Now, we're going to address other data problems in episodes to come. Meanwhile, the mediocre vaccination campaigns, hand in hand with the rollback in the non-pharmaceutical campaigns that successful vaccination depends on, have been taking place alongside the continuing emergence of multiple Omicron subvariants now circulating across large expanses of the world. XBB 1.5 has surged across the world, pushing back BQ1 and BA 2.75. XBB is holding on, especially in South Africa, which is also hosting BA5. For other countries, we're drawing from covariants.org. We see that China continues to host a majority of BA5 and the beginnings of XBB 1.5. Japan, a mix of BA5, BQ1, BA 2.75, and XBB 1.5. And India, XBB and XBB 1.5. To sum up, Raj Narayanan shows here the world diversity of sequences the past 20 days as of April 8th. Yes, XBB 1.5 is leading the way, in part due to the sampling bias toward high-income countries. But we see many subvariants and sublineages in play, including many XBBs, but also BN, CH, DU, XBF, and XBC, among others. Indeed, while the virus chugs along, it evolves new attributes. A US-Austrian team identifies SARS-2 variants with resistance to widely used antiviral treatments near Nirmatrelvir, the active component of Paxlovid, and clinical stage inhibitor Ensitrelvir, the active component of Sa-Cova. Here we see representative fluorescence microscopy images of a wild-type infection on the top disappearing with increasing concentrations of Nirmatrelvir, while the P168A173V mutants remain present up through 390 nanomolar of the drug. Indeed, the team's phylogenetic analyses show that several of these resistant variants pre-existed the very introduction of these drugs. Now, it's a phenomenon I noted over a decade ago. Resistance before the drug is introduced, which seems to be a violation of cause followed by effect, speaks to the nature of the pathogens we're up against. It also speaks to the kind of full spectrum response we need across pharmaceutical and non-pharmaceutical interventions to keep the virus from accessing the evolutionary elbow room it needs to come up with solutions to our solutions. New work, meanwhile, continues to characterize the cruel nature of the damage SARS-2 imposes. The Indonesian team of Stevanet Sumantri and Iris Rengganis summarize some of the many immunological pathways helping produce long COVID. Quote, long COVID is the consequence of multiple immune system dysregulation, such as T cell depletion, innate immune cell hyperactivity, lack of naive T and B cells, and elevated signature of pro-inflammatory cytokines, together with persistent SARS-CoV-2 reservoir and other consequences of acute infection. More specifically, quote, there's an activated condition of masked immune cells in long COVID with abnormal granulation and excessive inflammatory cytokine release, end quote. As we've reported on previous COVID This Week episodes, endothelial damage and microvascular thrombosis have been identified as one important cause of multi-system damage in long COVID. An Emory University team described a possible mechanism specific to that damage. In critically ill COVID-19 adults, fibrinogen-dependent red blood cell aggregation mechanically damages musculovascular glycocalyx, or the polysaccharides that project from and protect cell surfaces. This damage changes blood fluid shear. As one team member described in a popular article summarizing the results, quote, blood from patients severely ill with COVID-19 was unusually viscous. Think maple syrup rather than water, end quote. Here in figure A, we see the video frames showing red blood cells under shear combined with either COVID positive, non-COVID sepsis, or healthy plasma, with red blood cells more clumpy in COVID patients. Indeed, figures B through E show COVID positive patients with greater numbers, sizes, and velocity of cell clusters in blood flow. In another study, a Berlin team found patients with post-COVID exercise intolerance expressed fewer capillaries, thicker capillary basement membranes, and increased numbers of CD169 macrophages. While SARS-2 RNA wasn't detected in muscle tissues, transcriptomic analysis found gene signatures indicating immune dysregulation and altered metabolic pathways. The team hypothesized that initial infection may cause immune-mediated structural changes to microvascular, perhaps explaining the exercise fatigue and muscle pain long COVID patients suffer. The figure on the left shows the differences in how much of the RNA of these genes were expressed between a long COVID cohort and two control cohorts. The heat maps show that long COVID patients did not cluster in their RNA expression across biochemical cascades by gender or by age, but did differ by the severity of their exercise condition across the complement system, macrophages, other immune markers, and type 1 and 3 interferon. What's the duration of this long COVID going to be? New work from a Tianjin Medical University group shows long-term impacts of SARS-1 infections lasting 18 years and counting. Here are two heat maps showing differences between SARS-1 survivors in yellow and healthy controls in green over 19 metabolites on the top and on the bottom 32 plasma proteins, with red showing greater expression. Long story short, all these studies indicate long COVID is bad news for millions of people. While drug regimens that control the worst effects would be appreciated, the best way to avoid the worst of damage is avoid getting infected or reinfected in the first place. Turning to the US, we see from the Walgreens COVID-19 index that as of April 7th, national test positivity is down to 23% for both rapid tests and PCR. The CDC reports the latest round of excess deaths above the average deaths the past 6 years associated with the pandemic continues. The last month reports a decline under the baseline. That may be a measure of true decline, but may also represent data still being collected across the US. Indeed, since last we checked, CDC added another data point in excess deaths as of February 11th, that last red plus on the right. New studies indicate that as of 2021, the US has lost 3 years in life expectancy there on the left. Even with COVID removed on the right, the US still lost a whole year from non-COVID causes like violence and opioids. We should take this as emblematic of the state of public health overall. The US's failure to respond to the COVID pandemic is foundationally integrated with its failure to respond to other social crises. These excess mortalities are the kinds of early markers that signal the decline of Russian society post-Soviet Union in the 1990s. And the worst gap is found among young people from teen years to middle age, which folds in with the surge in years lived lost we highlighted on COVID This Week earlier in the year. The more young people die, the more potential years that could have been lived are lost. The Actuaries Institute COVID-19 mortality working group out in Australia shows that excess deaths can be parsed into those caused or related to COVID infection, to non-COVID impacts, and respiratory infections of other causes. The working group showed that for 2022, Australia, in contrast to the US and other countries that opened early or never really closed down, suffered its worst year in 2022, with huge peaks in COVID deaths in red due to delayed emergency care, undiagnosed COVID, and long COVID. Overloaded hospitals also drove non-COVID deaths in blue as well. In other words, this kind of work can be done to differentiate sources of excess mortality and figure out where to intervene and how, if government scientists were charged with that task. The New York Times is no longer updating its COVID case map that we've been using all along. We switched to the CDC's community transmission map, which is based on 1, new cases per 100,000 population in the past week, from a low of less than 10 cases to as high as over 100, and 2, the percent positive nucleic acid amplification test for the past week, from less than 5% positive to over 10%. We see here that Iowa is no longer reporting in. We see the West Coast hosting moderate outbreaks, save a county here and there. The Four Corner states appear getting hit hard, as is Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, and parts of the Dakotas, and the industrial Midwest all the way east to Western New York State. Another mode of tracking COVID-19 converges upon this cooling off. We see the levels of SARS-2 virus detected in the wastewater that comes through our sewage plants, in some ways a leading indicator of the pandemic for March 26th through April 9th. In the oranges and reds, we see plants at 60% or more of all the samples in SARS-2 detected taken nationally since December 2021, in a few spots out west, across much of eastern Nebraska, and in parts of the industrial Midwest, particularly Ohio. The East Coast, save a couple plants in Maine and the Carolinas, is cold. On the other hand, the more acute measure of changes in sewage loads over the past 15 days shows some areas heating up more than others. Here and there on the West Coast, into the Four Corners, especially Colorado, with spikes in parts of Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, and through New York State, upstate, and down. Some plants in the South and the Northeast are also reporting sharp increases. But these could be increases off a lowering floor as the pandemic contracts. Here are the 7-day averages of fractions of hospital beds filled by COVID patients in about 3,600 hospitals reporting March 25th through the 31st, mapped by the People's CDC's Les Schaffer. Schaffer noted that we're down another 150 hospitals reporting in. We see hospitals across California, Salt Lake City, the Twin Cities, and New York City apparently cooling off since we last checked. In contrast, hospitals in and around Phoenix appear heating up, while other previous hotspots remain filled up, including in Houston, Chicago, and Philadelphia. All at a time when hospital systems are moving to roll back their own masking policies. The People's CDC's weather report reported 138,000 cases of hospital-acquired COVID only 3 months into 2023. Hospitals are documented virus amplifiers, and masking should remain in place. To sum up, here's the People's CDC version of our present community transmission by county as of April 6, mapped again by Les Schaffer. This map shows the combo of caseloads and test positivity that the CDC plots. But unlike the CDC, the People's CDC differentiates the high level of danger counties are subjected to beyond 10% COVID positivity into high, very high, and extremely high exposure. Down at the bottom, we see the People's CDC also differentiates exposure by both the percent of counties and by the percent population. As we remarked earlier, Iowa isn't reporting in. Overall, we see a continuing spatial contraction here in the US, including the West Coast, more of the plains, Minnesota, much of the South, up the East Coast and into New England. A previously hard-hit Louisiana has cleared up. And at the same time, Alaska, Oklahoma, and single counties in the plains are hosting hotspots. Nevada and Utah appear to have bounced back in exposure. These spots might all be good places for a fully functional CDC to send teams to help tamp down the outbreaks and keep them from serving as reservoirs for a national rebound. Overall, we're down to 20% of the American people and communities subjected to high to extremely high COVID exposure. That's terrific news, although that may be in part dependent on reductions in testing. And we still have another 28.5% subjected to substantial exposure. So yes, progress, but not at a level yet to declare a public health emergency over, with 121,000 confirmed new cases this past week and 1,773 Americans dying. The outbreak stateside continues to evolve, with here the continued dominance of XBB 1.5, but also now the emergence in the blues at the bottom of XBB 1.5.1 and XBB 1.9.1. Here's the 15-day trend of all the genetic sequences of detected sublineages in the US as of April 12th, including their geographic origins. XBB 1.5 in blue is still ahead in states across the country. There are all sorts of other subvariants and sublineages circulating in such a way as to offer possible candidates for the next dominant variant or to contribute to the next recombinant that accelerates beyond both vaccine and population immunity. Indeed, all eyes are on new sublineage XBB 1.16 in red, reported to cause more cases and deaths in India. It is now spreading here stateside, as is XBB 1.9.1 in brown. Disease modeler J.P. Weiland posted an improved version of the CDC chart, now including the XBB 1.16 variant CDC had skipped. That's the kind of correction scientists and everyday people have made the entire pandemic. Indeed, we end our broadcast with a brief update where Washington and Atlanta are enrolling back the the pandemic response in the face of the ongoing pandemic. House Republicans proposed ending both the national emergency and the public health emergency a month earlier than the initial and already ill-considered date of May 11th. Despite White House statements against the proposals, as ending the emergencies even earlier would cause, quote, wide-ranging chaos and uncertainty throughout the healthcare system, Biden refused to veto the bill, rolling back the national emergency instead. The public health emergency remains in place another month. Winding down the pandemic is proving a discursive operation rather than based in the realities of still ongoing outbreaks. In an interview with Stat about medical and misinformation, White House COVID-19 response coordinator Ashish Jha noted that, quote, almost no one dies of this virus, end quote. More than 135,000 Americans have died of COVID during his tenure, including the nearly 1,800 this past week. And whoever died is too silent to object to the contention. An international team led by Oxford and including CDC staff estimated last year that more than 10.5 million children worldwide have lost a parent or caregiver to the pandemic. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky continued placing public health in second place. Late March, she answered Boston University Dean of Public Health Sandro Galea's query whether public health has a role in setting social values that, quote, I think we have a role to play in helping to understand risk, and I think we have a role to play in providing accurate science to help shape those values, but I don't think we get to say it's more important to have this amount of risk than it is to say that economy, your value on economy, end quote. How far have we fallen from modern public health, which placed political economy front and center right from the start? Rudolf Virchow, the father of modern pathology and a founder of social medicine, declared that medicine is a social science and politics is nothing else but medicine on a large scale. A notion that community groups yesterday and today follow, among them the People's CDC, and here, Southern Solidarity in New Orleans. On the basis of a year's work, the People's CDC just released its own external review of the Centers for Disease Control. Following both a review of the scientific and sociopolitical literatures and feedback from 500 people it interviewed and polled, public health professionals and community leaders alike, the People's CDC came to a different conclusion, finding the CDC providing cover for employers first and at the expense of accurate science. Quote, we found that the CDC prioritized individual choice and short-term business interests over sharing accurate scientific evidence with the public and protecting population health. Many of the participants within the review testified that the CDC had not been adequately dealing with the pandemic in the 8 categories we asked them to score: disease control and prevention, ethics, equity and justice, scientific integrity, public health infrastructure, communication, inclusion, and addressing root causes, end quote. The report package includes an external review fact sheet, an executive summary, and the full report itself. You can find a link to the report in our video description. And that's COVID This Week from the People's CDC. You can find all our episodes on the People's CDC YouTube channel. You can learn more about the People's CDC and read this week's COVID weather report at our website, peoplecdc.org.